بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد, I pray you all are well, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to continue to bless us with this beautiful rain, the much needed rain for our area. Alhamdulillah, excuse me. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to allow it to be a very productive rain, a rain that brings about fruit and greenery, bidnillahi ta'ala. I pray you all are healthy and well, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to preserve our health and to give shifa to all those who may have contracted this virus, and give shifa to all those who might be going through an illness, whether it's COVID or not. Today, I'd like to introduce an idea that I think is very, very important, and I hope I'm able to articulate and express to you why it is important. And that is the topic or the idea of a vision in terms of our Islamic ethics. Now, ethics, I mean it here in the broad sense, where it refers to our principles, how we engage society, our behaviors, such as being good to your neighbor, being good to your parents, the ethics of justice, the ethics of helping the poor, the orphan, those in need, among other things. And I am very confident, alhamdulillah, that the average Muslim is quite well aware of the rich tradition of ethics that our religion has. And I'm quite confident that anyone who is consistent in attending Jum'ah prayers is pretty acquainted with the idea and the types of ethics and ethical behaviors we have in our tradition. And so the purpose of this community message is not to remind us of any particular practice or principle, but rather to ask the question, can our ethics serve a greater purpose in terms of our participation in the Western world, or even at the international and global levels? In other words, how can our rich tradition of ethics allow Islam and Muslims a louder and more authoritative voice at the global level? Now, in order to better engage this question, I want to take a step back and introduce to you where this idea is coming from in the first place. You see, we live in an era called modernity, and I have spent a little bit of time researching what modernity is because, well, we are living in it. And modernity is an era that is yet to be completed. In other words, we have not left this era, and this era has not concluded, and therefore it is an incomplete project, meaning it is still taking form and taking shape. And what will determine the shape and form it takes is based on who is really forming it and creating it or moving it. Now, modernity really is an era that focuses on the individual in terms of their rights and their sovereignty. So with the onset of this era, you find new ideas such as citizenship, such as the nation state, right? The countries that we live in today, how they are formed, the notion of drawn borders, right? That didn't exist before the model of the nation state. Now we have clear borders where this is America, that's Canada. This is America, that's Mexico. This is Jordan, that's Syria, right? And based on this, governments have been able, or humanity has been able to develop international law. And based on those laws, there are certain practices all countries must adhere to. Of course, unless you are a veto country that is more powerful than the UN, the United Nations, and therefore they do whatever they want. That is a problem, but nonetheless, the idea is still there. And essentially, the goal is, how do we fulfill the human project? How do we buffer the human self? How do we create a society that is more catering to the person instead of to a family or to a kingdom? That's the idea here. Now, the Western world has done a lot when it comes to human rights, when it comes to the nation state, when it comes to technological advancements. But there is one area that the Western world has hilariously and has very much failed, has miserably failed in doing. And that is the area of ethics. Any one of us who has come from an Eastern country, or any one of us who knows the religion and what it has to offer and what it demands of the individual in terms of human behaviors and principles, when they look at the Western world and how they engage one another, they find it to be very, very uninsightful, very unwise. And if you want to kind of remind yourself or to further expose yourself to this problem, look at the media. Look at these sitcoms and these shows, especially how male and female couples engage with one another. It's really, really silly. The man says to the woman, I can't be with you. Why? Because I want to do other things in life. What are you, 12? You want to do other things in life? And what does that mean? In the Eastern world, a 15-year-old won't say something like this, because a 15-year-old recognizes that they are an individual within a greater body. They are an individual within a greater society. And that their manhood or that their femininity is commensurate to their ability to hold and to fulfill their social responsibilities and their social duties. That's why it is quite common for someone born and raised in the Eastern world to get married at a much earlier age than someone in the Western world. Why? Because they see themselves differently. It is part of my reputation to be able to raise a family, to be able to build a family. That is something honorable. That is something that is fulfilling and gratifying. But in the Western world, they have this huge problem to commitment. Let's get married. Oh no. Marriage. Commitment. One person. What am I going to do? I have to be with her. I might have to change the meal that I eat so that my wife can eat with me or that my husband can eat with me. Too much pressure. I can't take it. I mean, this is laughable. It is really strange. I mean, what do you mean? What's so burdensome about asking your wife, do you need anything on my way home? What is so burdensome that the wife has to eat when, or maybe has to eat when her husband comes home, or has to wait until her husband comes home in order to have a meal? Or that if she likes this food, but her husband doesn't like that food, that it's okay to change it. I mean, why is this such a burden? What's the big deal? In the end, it's only food. It's really strange. Why? Because the Western world has put very little time, very little resources to develop the principles and the ethics. And you find this problem. But Islam has such a rich tradition. And now, understanding this void and the need for discussions in this particular area, we as Muslims, if we play it right, if we build a vision around our ethics to where it's more than just something that I do in my private home or my private settings, but rather I can take my ethics as ideas that I can present to the greater society, we can take up this task that needs to be taken up. It's not something small or mundane. It is quite serious. Families are falling apart. And if families fall apart, society falls apart. As soon as a child turns 18, ma'a salama. Bye-bye, mom. Bye-bye, dad. I am an adult now. You are now secondary to my life. That is strange to the Muslim. That is strange to someone born and raised in a Muslim society or even a non-Muslim society in the Eastern world. What do you mean your parents are just secondary now? Or sometimes it's the parents. You're 18 now. I am no longer financially responsible for you. What do you mean? Are they no longer your child? I mean, what is it? I mean, how do you view your child? Just as a burden you can't wait to get off your shoulders? Or are they a piece of you? I mean, it's very strange, and this needs to be resolved. And what we have can resolve it. I continue to be optimistic and hopeful that we as Muslims will continue to adhere to our principles. Our principles will continue to play the role it has always played in our lives. And that we can participate in the project of modernity, to where we as Muslims can influence the trajectory of our era. That we as Muslims can formulate modernity to where it is healthier for humanity. Because if the Western world continues to follow this path, I mean, what is it going to lead to in the end? When 30% of children in America, 30%, 1 in every 3 children are raised in a single family home. 1 in every 3 children are completely disconnected from their infancy from one of their parents. And now we have these social deviance issues. We have these psychological issues, mental health issues. It's not coming from nowhere. The parent is integral, is crucial to the development of a child. We in Islam have the solutions. When we live and we don't know who our neighbor is, we as Muslims have something to say about that. And we make it very intimate, very personal, where we as human beings, we don't focus on the individual in terms of what is simply his or her rights. We also equally, if not more importantly, focus on the human responsibility of ourselves. When Islam, you look at the vision, the philosophy of society in Islam, how it engages the notion of a society, that you are a member of the community. Essentially, what the Prophet ﷺ teaches us is that you are responsible for those around you. And therefore, whoever believes in Allah and His Messenger, whoever believes in Allah and the afterlife, this is pretty serious. I mean, this is a serious statement. If you truly believe in Allah, if you have a relationship with Allah, if you revere the Prophet, ﷺ, if you seek the afterlife, then your human responsibilities, your societal responsibilities are more than just an act of virtue. They are a responsibility that you will be held accountable for. And so the Prophet ﷺ makes many statements like, whoever believes in Allah and the next life, then they are not aggressive or harmful to their neighbors. And statements like, a believer is not one who goes to sleep when their neighbor is hungry. A believer is not one who disconnects their relationship from their parents or from their siblings or from their blood relatives. A believer isn't someone who deceives a fellow member of society. A believer isn't someone who betrays a fellow member of society. A believer isn't one who cons other people. It is personal. It is attached and ascribed to our belief in Allah, to our belief in the afterlife, to our reverence of the Prophet ﷺ, as if to say, if you engage in these unethical and unprincipled behaviors, there's something wrong with your iman. Double check yourself. Furthermore, Allah is alluding to the fact, the Prophet ﷺ is alluding to the fact that if we do not fulfill our responsibilities towards our fellow human, to our fellow humans, to our fellow citizens, to our fellow members of society, we will be asked about that on the Day of Judgment. We will be held accountable for that in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on a day that is 50,000 years. So ethics and principles to us aren't simply virtuous behaviors where if we do it, there's reward. If we don't do it, you're okay. No, if you do it, there's reward. But if you don't do it, then there's accountability. We cannot, in Islam, we simply cannot derive, we cannot build, we cannot even imagine a society, a world where we are simply disconnected from other members of society. It is impossible to reconcile between being a pious person, a spiritual person, and being disconnected from society. It does not go hand in hand. And therefore, we as Muslims need to become confident in the richness and the efficacy of our ethics, of our Islamic principles, and rise to the occasion, rise to the challenge of the much needed discussions about the situation of families, the situation of parenting, the situation of neighbors, the situation of the poor. Look at us here in Southern California. California has 49% of the homeless in America. 49%. What are we going to do about it? Do we really accept this? It is simply unbelievable, unacceptable to the Muslim for there to be someone who is hungry in our society. And we are not simply people who preach but don't practice. We are not simply people who say this is part of our tradition yet have nothing to show that we actually honor this. In the time of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, one of the early khulafa, they were so effective, they were so sophisticated in making sure that every member in society had what they need, to the extent, this is recorded history, to the extent that Umar ibn Abdul Aziz went around asking people who is in need of zakah money. This is their right. If there's anyone poor, this is their right, their God-given right. They went around asking, is there's zakah, is anyone in need of it? He went around all of society and could not find one person who needed money. So what did he do? He went around buying food for the animals and the birds. So to make sure that they're not hungry even. And look, don't think that that's just a utopia that has gone to pass. Look at Turkey today. I don't mean to be political here. Look at Turkey today. They have so much effectiveness in making sure that members of society are okay, to the extent that there is a part of the government that is dedicated to making sure that the animals are fed, to the extent that animals are so comfortable there. And I hear this from people living there, that you'll find dogs and cats sitting down in very public areas with a lot of human traffic, and they're not afraid of what people are going to do to them. They're sitting there comfortably. Do not think that this is impossible. It is a mission that we as Muslims have all the information necessary to build a structure, a system effective enough to bring about this result. The resources are there. It's about people trusting and being confident in what we have as Muslims and having the courage to say, we have a good system. Listen to what we have to say. It's about recognizing the opportunity that we as Muslims, if we want to be relevant to the global community, to the international community, if we want to get out of this stereotype, the Muslims have nothing to offer the world. And a lot of our youth and a lot of Muslims, not just youth, a lot of Muslims think this way. Islam has nothing to offer the world. We don't have any technologies to offer the world. We don't have any interesting and innovative ideas to offer the world. We don't have an interesting system of economy, a system of governance to offer the world. We are just secondary. No, we have something very important to offer the world. That is principles and ethics. We can play an integral role in the human project of modernity. Let us build a vision for our ethics as we continue to introduce and remind ourselves of our social responsibilities, our Islamic duties towards society. Let us begin to ask the question and to engage the conversation. How can we enhance our rich tradition of principles and ethics to where we build a vision that is able to penetrate the global community and offer a service to humanity? We can do it. Let's get started in doing that. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the tawfiq to find this vision, to build it, and to offer something to humanity in a very, very critical time where people are losing hope in the human, in humans, in governments, in society, and in economics. Let us rise to the challenge and let us voice our positions. Let us share the richness of our tradition to the rest of the world, especially the Western world. وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.